I love my fun music. Welcome to the second edition of Food, Faith, and Feelings on Business RadioX. We are broadcasting live from the Subaru of Gwinnett studio inside the Sonesta Gwinnett Place Atlanta Hotel. The mission of Food, Faith, and Feelings is to walk with you on your journey to wholeness. Brought to you as an educational program under the nonprofit Manna Scholarship Fund, our program is designed to help you better understand issues related to your physical and mental diet, what you consume that impacts your head, your heart, and your soul. So we are thankful to our business partnership with Paradigm Security and Mr. Rick Strawn for providing this opportunity to come to you today. We hope to enrich your life as he has enriched ours. So, my guest today is Sam Trammel. Hello, Sam.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Great. So Sam and I have a pretty long 4 or 5 year relationship.
Yeah.
It's pretty unique. And I am actually just going to let Sam introduce herself and how our relationship started.
So, I'm Sam. I met Genie as my therapist, actually. My husband and I initially had decided to start therapy for marriage counseling, and I ended up working on eating disorder treatment in the process. I did not know that I had an eating disorder.
Much to your surprise. I remember this. Yes, I remember this.
That was not my intent of starting, but and even Andrew kind of pushed us into therapy. I wasn't really the one who was.
No, not at all.
I was opposed to it, but that's how it started.
Right. And so do you want to talk about what the initial reason was why I decided to take you, like you came in as a couple, and then I said, well, hold on, there's some stuff going on with Sam that needs to be resolved first. Do you remember that?
I do. I don't know what tipped you off to do that, though.
Could it have been the pale face, the emaciation, you were pretty resistant to talking about much. In fact, I think you were pretty anxious.
That sounds right. I had a hard time talking.
Yes. For most of the time. So what you're seeing here today is the effects of some pretty intensive therapy over several years.
Yes.
And I think what tipped me off with you and your eating disorder is you just looked sick. And so I'm so used to seeing people who have eating disorders that I think I asked you what you were eating, and it was all of about 5 Cheerios and a couple of pieces of apple and beer.
It was. Apples, goldfish, and beer.
Yes. And
Bagels.
So, yes, I said, that's probably not enough to even feed your 3-year-old child. Yes. So we might need to have some more conversation about that.
Yes. I do remember that. And at that time, everything was everybody else's fault. I couldn't really see, what was going on with me. So yes, I definitely remember that.
What was that like to hear?
Was funny as far as the whole, not funny, but like the whole eating disorder thing. I don't remember being super intensely uncomfortable until it was pointed out to me that something was wrong. And then it was a problem, because before that it was everybody else's problem.
Staying in La La Land was great. Denial is wonderful.
I was so numb. I didn't ever feel sad or angry really, or feel like I needed to need anybody, no connection with anybody. And it was just sort of this safe haven, but it was starting to destroy my marriage, and I'm sure it affected my relationship with my daughter at that time too. She was 1.5, 2 years old, I think, that time. Yeah. So I do remember when we started working on things. We first really started working on the trauma stuff.
Right.
So I guess I'll kind of touch on that a little bit.
Okay.
So a big part of what really kind of sparked my eating disorder was when I was 17, I was raped. And after that, I pushed everything back. I remember feeling like I was different from everybody else. It was like I was looking at people through a glass window, and
so you're really disconnected from the world.
Really disconnected, and I lost my appetite because I was just, I don't know, it was this weird disconnection, and I lost my appetite, and I realized after a while that feeling empty felt good. Like, it made me feel better. And then I started losing weight, and that felt even better. And then we talked about dispelling a myth, and so I think this is maybe a good place to put it. Okay.
So your eating disorder didn't start out because you were trying to go on a diet.
No, not for me personally. I mean, no.
A lot of people it does.
Yeah.
However, your eating disorder was a result of trying to manage your pain.
For me, yes. I mean, not to say prior to that had I, wished to be thinner. Yes, I just wasn't it was not worth being hungry to do it at that time.
So any kind of feeling.
Yes. Yeah, that's really what it was. Like, it was just this, it made me not hungry, and the pain made me just not hungry. And then when I didn't eat, I felt so much better. And when I started losing weight, I felt even better. And then as I started to look different, it was like, oh, that was the old me. That happened to. That's not even, it felt safe to be thinner. And it just gave me that disconnection from that event.
Okay, so again, I'm just going to repeat, your eating disorder was not something that you thought, I'm going to lose weight, I'm going to stop eating, It
didn't start that way, no.
No, it
ended that way.
It ended that way. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll get there. So because a lot of people think out there in the world, I have a friend that likes to say, can I just give them like a jelly donut, or can I just buy them a cheeseburger or a pizza? And I'm like, no, you want to put their greatest fear in front of them and say, do this. Because the behavior, the eating disorder behavior, actually functions as a protection mechanism.
Yeah. I just wanted to feel okay.
Yeah.
So.
And there's, I don't know anybody that doesn't.
Right.
There's a lot of people out there that are drinking, that are looking at porn, that are trying to lose weight. They're trying to gain weight. They're exercising. They think if they're all muscular. There's a lot of things out there about our bodies and about how we are trying to take care of ourselves and feel better, and feel okay.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of the way I like to let's just help you feel okay.
Yeah.
And we kind of broke it down in terms of feeling loved and feeling safe.
Yeah.
So
even feeling loved is feeling safe in a way.
Right. Well, what's the thing that you like now to say? You like to say now about safety?
Oh, that I take my safety with me.
Right.
That was something I learned in therapy.
Yep.
That was such a revolutionary thing for me.
Why?
Because I remember when you told me that, and I remember the session, like I was already feeling a little bit defensive because you said something I just didn't like. And
never happened.
No. And I remember I was like looking out the window and sort of pretending like I wasn't listening to what you were saying, even though I was, but I didn't want you to think I was. And and then I remember you saying that, and I remember like I couldn't quite grasp what it meant, but it was one of those things where I knew like this is going to come back around. Like have you ever had that where you hear something, you're like, I don't get it now, but this is going to come back around. And
something about it stuck.
Yeah. For years. I mean, because it wasn't until 2 or 3 years later that I was like, that's what it is.
There it is. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
How did you get to that point where you realized that you could bring safety with you? And what does that mean to you?
So I'll probably have to tell a bit of my story more.
Yeah, I want you to.
Okay. So a big part of my eating disorder had to do with the trauma. And, so I did get to where found all kinds of ways to lose a certain amount of weight to where I looked significantly different from what I looked like before. I colored my hair. I did everything. I was trying to look significantly different than what I did before. And
before when you were raped?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay.
Before when I was raped. I changed my hair color. I changed the style of it. I changed the way that my body looked. Changed the way I dressed. Changed everything. And, when I started seeing you, we did therapy just individually, but it actually made things harder. I didn't really have the skills to be able to deal with the pain that was coming up. And things for me, at least, got a lot harder before they got easier. And because we were talking about really hard things and it made a lot of pain come out. And so, I used behaviors worse as it came, because really, honestly, because
you used to what?
Like my eating disorder behaviors got worse because there was all this pain and I didn't know what to do with it. Like, at least before, they were squelched down a little bit, but when we started talking about the trauma and just pain that was coming up for me, I had to be able to manage it some way. So I restricted more. I was cutting. I was doing anything I could to try to get the pain out. And so I did end up, going to a residential treatment facility for almost 4 months. And
can I interrupt? Yeah. So just for people to know, I am a seasoned therapist. I've been doing this for about 25 years. And so it's not my intention to have someone come in and say, all right, tell me about all your trauma. In fact, I think that as you got worse, we actually talked less and less about the trauma.
We did.
But coming into therapy becomes the catalyst for, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to deal with stuff I don't really want to. And so it actually just kind of comes up on its own.
It did. Once it came up, though, I couldn't forget it. I couldn't get out of my head.
Yeah, because sometimes you start having memories and flashbacks and all of
nightmares and
right.
Yeah. So, and it did get unmanageable for me, and it got to where it was, I think finally when I knew I had to just do the whole residential thing, was it got to a point where it was getting a little bit hard to take care of my daughter. Like, I remember one time, I'd restricted to the point where I was just too dizzy and was laying down, and my daughter was up in her high chair crying because she wanted food and I couldn't get up. And it was like, oh my gosh, at this point, that was when I threw in the towel and was like, okay, I can't do this. And so that was when I did go to the residential treatment facility, and I did, some trauma work there. It was mostly doing weight restoration, and that was a big part of it, was like healing my body a little bit. But I remember when I left, I was weight restored. I was one of the lucky people who got to stay all the way through, but like I felt like I was in somebody else's body. I mean, literally, it was like my soul was in somebody else's body, and it was scary. And so when I did discharge, I relapsed pretty quickly.
Which is common.
Yeah, I would say within a few days.
I like to, so my analogy for treatment is it's kind of like when you get on a plane and you fly from Atlanta to New York. And, New York is a very different city than Atlanta. And so you're in this contained environment, and it's controlled, and you have your meals at a certain time, and you can go to the bathroom at a certain time, and you have to have permission to do things, and you start talking about stuff, but it's not where the focus isn't let's just work through your trauma. It's let's get your brain to a place where it's nourished enough to actually think and feel and deal with stuff. Yeah. And so when you get to that other place, it can feel pretty foreign. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it definitely was getting my brain a lot healthier. I was actually, before I came on today, I read some of my old journals from when I was in residential, and I was just kind of trying to remember exactly where my mindset was, and I was asking the same questions over and over. It was almost like I was forgetting. You know what I mean? And I kept writing about how I thought I felt like feelings were either good or bad. Like there wasn't like a mad, sad, angry. Like I had a really hard time like really telling what I was feeling. I just knew it was bad, and there was definitely just this huge disconnection and between your brain and your feelings.
Yeah, I could see it in my writing, and it was interesting to look back on.
I'll bet.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great way to give yourself kudos for all the work that you have done, and you're very different today than you were 4 or 5 years ago.
I am, definitely. and I'm thankful for that. I'm not as scared. That was a big part of it.
Good. So what happened when you came out?
So I came out, I was weight restored.
I remember you looked fantastic.
I did. But I didn't feel fantastic. I know. I was terrified, and I still had this fear in the back of my mind that, how do I word this? I just being shapely and curvy again, it made me very scared. It made me worried that I was at risk for being raped again, and I remember when I first got out, I was like, I'll just lose a little bit, that won't make any difference. And
and now that I'm in control,
right, I'll just lose a little bit. And even when I left, like, my goal was survival. Like, it wasn't to thrive by any means. I just wanted to survive. I don't want to die. I'm going to do this because I don't want to die. I still hated eating, hated it. I did not enjoy food at all. I forced myself white knuckle to do it because I love my daughter and I wanted to set a good example. But I was miserable. I hated eating and I hated fullness. That was another big part of it. Like, whenever I would get full, and I wrote about that a lot in my journal too, when I would get really full, it would be like this pressure and this pushing on my upper stomach, and it would kind of spark that trauma memory again of somebody just pushing and being on top of me, and I would just sweat, and I would panic, and I would cry, and so it made eating really difficult, even though I wanted to do better. Like, I really wanted to do better. Every time I would get to where I was a little bit healthier, I would relapse because I would just get so scared about my body changing, and the fullness would just set me back.
This would be a great time for us to talk a little bit about coping.
Okay.
So you did this this bouncing back and forth.
I did a lot
for a couple years even. So you would get to that place. You were eating in the program. So you came to Manna. You were in our IOP for a while.
Yes.
Do you want to say how long?
A little bit over 2 years.
Right. Which is really weird for a lot of people because insurance wants to kick them out after about 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that's different about Manna is that we will pick up where insurance doesn't want you to, where insurance leaves off.
Yeah.
And so I know that there were times that you were like, insurance is going to quit paying, so I'm going to quit. And I was like, no.
I'll see you at 3:00.
You are going to come in here, and this is what, we negotiated a rate.
We did.
And so we reduced your fees. And because you had worked so hard and you put a lot of energy into it. And so if somebody's going to invest in themselves and get better, I'm going to invest in them.
There were times I got so frustrated because it's really hard the back and forth is hard. Like, I would do good and I would relapse good and relapse, and it got to where I was tired, and there were times I was ready to quit, but nobody at Manna ever gave up on me.
No.
Ever. Even when I would send a message,
We're
like,
more
I think
bullheaded than you are.
At times, yes. There are times I'm like, you know what, I think I need to quit, and you'd be like, I see you at 3. I'm like, ugh, she doesn't get it. I hate it.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the coping that you did.
Okay.
So there were some specific times when you were talking about that pressure inside of your belly. So what were some of the things that we did that were helpful?
Probably the most helpful thing that I remember us doing, I remember there was a time in our eating area where I had gotten really, really full, and I froze because I was panicking and I couldn't really move. I was just sort of like, it's hard to really explain a panic attack, but it's like I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, and I couldn't really move. And
your body shut down.
Yeah, it was just, yeah. And you had taken me out the back door, and you were like, okay, we're gonna get this out. And you had taught me, like, we went back to this kind of like a ravine type area, I guess you would call it.
Yep.
And you had taught me how to scream the
pain,
not the fullness, but yeah, like the feeling that I had in my body. You showed me pain. You showed me how to scream from there to get it out, so that it wasn't just sitting there.
So one of the things that people don't understand is that we have thoughts, right? And I literally watched this thing yesterday, and it talked about how words have an energy, and it impacts water. So positive words are healing, and they turn water into like this beautiful snowflake. And negative words turn it into like brown and like ugly and disformed. I'll show it to you.
Okay.
So our words, the things we say to ourselves about ourselves, I am ugly, I am fat, I am whatever, they lead to feelings, and feelings is energy. Right? Yeah. Try and stifle a laugh in church. Right? So somebody does something funny, you fart, whatever. Something funny happens, and you can't just bust a gut, right, in church. That's painful to hold that in.
Yeah.
It's the same thing when you're trying to get your pain out or your sadness out. It gets trapped in your body, and it clogs up the system. And so yours got clogged up because our body has cellular memory. And so it got clogged up around your abdomen. And so learning how to breathe, blow, and or scream that out was really important and powerful, because the energy has to come out.
It took a lot of practice, because even when I think that first time we tried it, it still kept coming from like here, because everything was so strangled. I was like,
nope, Sam, deeper.
It took some practice. But I taught my daughter how to do that.
Did you?
She does it.
I didn't know I love that.
Yep.
Oh.
But that was definitely probably one of the most helpful things. And I mean, even where I'm at now, I've used it before.
Great.
Because like you said, it's hard to hold that in. And once I figured out how to get it out, it got easier, but man, it took some practice. Even crying. Remember, there was a long time where I couldn't even cry.
Oh, yeah.
And it was so painful to hold all that in, but I had a very difficult time finding or figuring out a healthy way to let it out.
You just had to change your beliefs.
I did.
About crying. That it wasn't bad. And you weren't a wuss.
It just took practice. Yes. That too. Yes.
Yeah. So crying is okay. Screaming is okay. Journaling.
That was super helpful. Sometimes when I can't cry, I journal and it will come out.
Right. And you started a really cool thing.
I did.
And you taught me about a way that you coped.
So a cool way that I found to cope. My daughter has like bath crayons. And we had in my old house a pretty big bathtub. And one of the ways that I would try to like calm myself would be to kind of just like take a hot bath so that my muscles would kind of relax a little bit. It's also a little bit grounding. And I had her bath crayons, and there were times when I would feel just so much anger or sadness or pain, like as I was, nourishing my body. All these feelings were coming out.
Right.
And it felt really scary because I didn't understand why it was happening or where it was coming from. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really hard, for one thing, I'd been numb for so long. So when I felt emotions, they were so big. And I remember you giving the example, it's like trying to take a drink of water out of a fire hydrant. And it was just like that. Like I would try to feel a little bit and it would just go boosh. And it was so scary not understanding why I was feeling the way I was. And so it was a little bit of DBT too, which is a different kind of therapy. But I would do this like mapping almost of like, I would get her bath crayons and I had this whole bathtub to write and draw on. And I would, kind of make a word, maybe the feeling. And then I would just draw all the thoughts that I was having at the moment. And I would hit one, like, yeah, that's it. And then I would trail off of that one and, write questions like why. And then I would have to think about it, and eventually I would come to something that made sense. And then it wasn't scary anymore. Then I could manage the emotion. But when I didn't understand why it was happening, it was terrifying. I felt like I was a crazy person. And I found that I can manage my feelings as long as I at least somewhat understand where it's coming from.
So that's a fantastic point. And what's great is that you and I actually knew exactly what you knew what I was talking about without us even we didn't even practice this beforehand.
No. I knew what you were talking about. It was different.
But so Sam became her own therapist, right? In the bathtub. That mm-hmm. is, you literally are doing exactly what a therapist would do. Mm-hmm. And so, but it was very intuitive to you because your brain was working and you're a logical person. And mm-hmm. so, learning that the thoughts and the feelings are connected mm-hmm. and that things come from relationships and that things are just all connected. Mm-hmm. And so you brought up the word crazy. So people that don't understand why they're thinking and why they're feeling the way they are, the word that we use is crazy because we don't understand. Mm-hmm. But a good therapist will tell you do make sense. We don't understand how it's all connected, but I bet when we break it down, it 100% makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so I want people to understand that if you have these thoughts or you have these feelings or you have these behaviors and you don't understand why, that there is something in your past, there's something that you're holding in, and there is connection. And it's just up to you to try and figure out how you are connected internally mm-hmm. so that you can make sense of yourself, which in and of itself is a huge relief.
Yes.
Thank God I'm not crazy.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Like that totally makes sense.
Yes.
And so fantastic.
Yes.
Fantastic. So let's I'm going to move us forward a little bit. So tell us a little bit about when you got to the end of that journey, what that was like for you.
And this will kind of tie into the bringing safety with me part.
Okay.
So let's see. Eventually, I did get to where after lots of practice, I think I finally just got to a point where I got to a healthier weight, and I got to where I wasn't so afraid of myself. Like there was a point where I was really afraid of myself because the whole like feelings and understanding, like that was scary. But finally, after being in a healthy place for long enough, even though I was white knuckling it, I started to feel a little bit better because, nothing horrible had happened to me yet. Like you said, I almost had to get there for a little while, see that nothing's going to happen and, proceed. But, so that was part of it. Another part of it was food started getting easier eventually because all of a sudden there was a turning point where I started to crave food. It was no longer something I absolutely hated. So that was, and I'm not even sure how that happened, but there was finally just me doing the work long enough. Eventually it got to where I was craving foods, and that made things a lot easier. And so, even that was a process, but there got to a point where, I'm trying to think of how to word this. I got to a point where I was ready to talk more about growing spiritually, and that was a really big part of what I really needed because I was really looking for safety. I needed safety, and
well, coming from the situation makes 100% sense.
Right. And, even I would struggle with OCD type behaviors, all in this need to feel safe. And so that was really the hole that I needed to fill. And we did start having some spiritual, talking, and that really did spark some thought and research on my part. And I did, I did grow up going to church, so I had some background, but I didn't of the knowledge of God, meaning almost in like a textbook type way. So I had some background, but I had not yet developed just that close relationship with God yet, because I don't know, I had this view that maybe God didn't like me. And even going through treatment, it did take me longer than a lot of my friends who went through. I would see them get better, and I was still where I was, and I was like, okay, Lord, I see you healing other people, like what's going on? Like, yeah. And I really, and it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, like
Jesus, I know you love me.
Yeah, I was like, okay, like, and it kind of hurt my feelings a little bit, but now I can look back and see that I did need that extra work to really be able to appreciate, what he's delivered me from, honestly. Because I can honestly say now, after everything I've been through and all the work I've done and all the work that you guys have done with me, I mean, not even just the food, even part of it down to like being able to show myself self-compassion. Like, that was the hardest thing for me. It used to be whenever I would mess up, I was terrified to mess up because of the jerk inside my head that would just like berate me. And so I was so afraid to mess up, and I would punish myself for my mistakes, like physically sometimes. But I remember, and I'm kind of getting off topic, but like some of the things that, so like when I was in treatment at Manna, the staff there, they would encourage me, and they would fight that voice for me. And after I'd been there long enough, like, your voice was in my head. Some of the other therapist voices were in my head, where
probably still are.
Probably, yes, they are. But I was able to. There was even one particular part where I remember one of the staff just showed me unbelievable compassion in a situation where I felt like I failed. And I remember being so blown away by her reaction, and I was like, "This is it. This is compassion." So that after that, when I was a little bit more on my own, even though I didn't know how to give myself self-compassion yet, I would draw back to that memory, and that's how it felt. That's what happened, and I would be able to use that to do on my own. But I totally forgot where I was going with that. I'm sorry.
Well, we were just talking about the end, then I was going to kind of start bringing up what your role is with Manna now.
Oh, yes. Okay. So now I feel I feel like I have a better relationship with food than people who haven't even had an eating disorder to some degree.
Sure. You've got an appreciation.
I have appreciation, and I can sit here and say that I can eat whatever I want, and I don't feel guilty about it, and I don't even really think about it.
Shut up.
I mean, the only thing I will say, when I am in my feelings, like, naturally my appetite will decrease a little bit more, but it naturally comes back up. Yeah. But I don't stress about it. I don't worry about it. If I grow out of my clothes, I'm just like, darn, do I wish I fit my clothes? Yes, but it's not going to ruin my day. Like, I'm going to move on.
Sure.
And so I'm able to talk. I have so much freedom in that way. I am.
Yes, people don't understand that when you were so worried about how you were going to come across and how I was going to see you, and literally it would take her 5 minutes to say 5 words. And so I knew that there was a lot of fear inside of you.
I don't have to worry so much about what people think of me. I mean, I'm still human, but I'm much more comfortable in myself to where I can live my life much more joyfully. And part of that too is, the relationship I have with Christ, where I do feel that safety. I know that wherever I am, whatever the situation is, even if I'm in my feelings, like, I know that as a child of God, that I take my safety with me and that I'm okay. Yeah. And that definitely influences the way that I live my life and the way that I respond with people.
Well, not only do you take your safety, right? And our safety comes from God.
Yes.
But you allow yourself to have that.
Yes.
You don't beat yourself up anymore.
No.
And so you are now a safe person for you.
Yes. Exactly what I was trying to say. Thank you. Yes.
I'm used to doing this kind of thing.
Yes. Thank you.
Good.
And then as for what I do with Manna now.
Yeah. So Sam has taken on a really, really cool role.
It's so fun.
You developed it.
I did. So when I finished treatment and through the IOP program at Manna, I didn't have any like friends. I had coworkers that I worked with and they were my friends, but I still hadn't even really developed that all the way yet. But I was leaving the program without a support network, really, because I had been in my eating disorder so long and had isolated myself so much. The friends that I had at one point, I didn't have anymore because I'd pushed them away. And so I still didn't have any friends. And I remember I did come to you and I was just in tears and I was like, how am I going to do this? I don't have any friends and I don't have any, can I make an alumni group of the people who have graduated? And maybe we could just, and we could meet and we could, we could do this together, because it's too hard for me to do on my own. Like, even when I was done, I wasn't ready to do it on my own. Yeah. Because it's so hard to talk about the thoughts that come with eating disorders and the struggles that come with it. It's so hard to talk about that to people who have not experienced it. Right. And you graciously said that I could, and it was
fantastic.
It was easier to put together because I was there for so long. I knew everybody and everybody knew me.
Sure.
So it was a little bit easier to put together for that reason too. But what we do is we do meet once a month and we do different things. It's a support group.
So there's no therapist there?
No therapist there, no. But we have been meeting at Manna. At times before, we have met at restaurants, before the COVID stuff.
Sure.
And we
go on hikes.
We did do that once. A lot of times when we get together, we like to craft. We're artsy people. So a lot of times we'll get together, and while we're talking about what's going on in our lives, because sometimes it's just needing to get out those thoughts and what's going on with somebody, with a group of people that are not going to be judgmental, that have felt that before, and that already kind of know our story. It just makes it easier. Sure. And we'll do a lot of times like some kind of art project with it, just because it's more fun that way. I think the next group, we're going to do like a game night.
Cool.
So we do a lot of different things, but we also have like a group text set up where, if there's a certain moment where somebody needs support and it comes up, then there's several ears that are there that can support. Or even if somebody just wants to be one-on-one, we can do that. Like, because all of us have a little bit more experience in certain areas or different walks. And so it's just so much easier to not do it on. Like, I can't even express that enough. It's so much easier to do it alongside somebody else, because even in times when it was really hard and I was out of the program, there were times when I would be able to tell myself, you know what, I can do this because there are other people who are also doing this. And it's just having people behind you is so much behind me. It was so much easier.
Right. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to join the alumni group because they've gone through eating disorder treatment and they would like some extra support, how do they get in touch with you?
I have an email address through Manna, though I don't know it off the top of my head.
alumni@mannatreatment.com.
Yes. So that would be an excellent way to contact me. There is, somebody who didn't technically go through Manna who, so we can definitely do that.
Yeah. And if you don't email her, you can always call Manna at 770-495-9775, and we can connect you with Sam. So Sam, we are going to be closing up now, and I asked you to do one more little thing. Yes. Do you want to share that with us?
Yes. So I was to pick a favorite scripture. I'm terrible at memorizing, so I wrote it down. The one I chose is Exodus 20:2-3. It says, I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must have no other God but me. And the reason I picked this, I actually saw it. It was one of the ones I saved in my journal from when I was in residential treatment. But it speaks so loud to me because, not to minimize what the Hebrews went through in Egypt, but
sure.
In a way, like, when I was trapped in my eating disorder, like, Egypt, like, my eating disorder was my Egypt. I was in slavery. I wanted to change and I couldn't. And I remember that was the scariest part, was I always assumed that I could change if I wanted to. And when I tried to, I couldn't. And it was terrifying. And it literally was like in a, I don't want to use the word trapped, but I was bound in it. And I know for a fact that I was delivered, that God delivered me from that. And I know that he used Manna to do that. And so that's why it speaks so loud to me. And then the last part, that you must have no other God but me. Like, I am able to focus on him and really work toward my relationship with him, because I'm not bound by anything else. I'm free to pursue him. And so for that reason, I really like that scripture.
Well, that's fantastic, because I think you know that Manna comes from that story.
Yes, from the Exodus.
Yes, when the Israelites were in the desert for 40 years, and the only way they got out was they followed God. He was steam, and he was a cloud.
Yes.
And when he lifted up, they packed up all of their things, and then they moved, and he literally led them through the desert to the other side, to the promised land. And that is why, and he fed them manna while they were in the desert. And so the premise behind Manna is, we want to help you with your daily food. You can't take too much, you can't take too little. And when you are in your emotional and your spiritual desert, we want to help lead you to follow God, because he's ultimately the way you get better.
Yes.
So Sam, this has been fantastic. I appreciate you. I know we're going to have you again. And so I just want to thank everyone for tuning in to Food, Faith, and Feelings today. We want to walk with you on your journey to wholeness, and just want to make sure that you subscribe to our show. You can find us on about 12 different podcast apps, such as Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, or Spotify. And all shows are also archived on businessradiox.com. Just go to businessradiox.com, select the Gwinnett Studio, and click on Food, Faith, and Feelings. Until next time, I am Dr. Genie Burnett, and this has been Food, Faith, and Feelings on Business Radio X.